Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti. Welcome to Resiliency Matters. This is where we take the big resiliency research and best practices and break it down into small bite-sized pieces that you can begin using immediately to strengthen yourself and others. What if you could learn not just from one, but from two of the sitting members of the Resilient America Roundtable? Would you spend the next 28 minutes with us? What if in the next 10 minutes you could learn the key recommendations made by the Roundtable after studying community resilience in depth? Would you hang out with us? Introducing my other half today, it's actually two other halves. Dr. Linda Augustine is director of the Resilient America Roundtable. She is a Harvard-trained geologist with a special interest in risk and resilience. Linda Langston, I'm welcoming back to the show, the first time we've had a repeat guest. Linda is an elected official in Linn County. She's been a supervisor for 12 years. She served as the president of the National Association of Counties last year, and her presidential initiative was Ready and Resilient Counties. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Mollie.
The reason I'm having you back on, Linda, and you here with us, Lauren, is a lot has happened since we last visited, including some very exciting information that the National Academy of Sciences has selected the first pilot resilient community in America, and it is Linn County, Iowa.
Yes.
So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thrilled to be working with you.
Thank you.
And we
Thrilled to be here.
have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
We have coming off of a couple days of meetings as you're here, and some of that is going to be coming out. So let's lay some groundwork for resilience. You come here from the federal level, the national perspective. What is a resilient nation, and why is it important?
So a resilient nation is the collection of communities, regions, states, and the federal agencies, kind of in this vertical spectrum, that can be ready at the local level and only go up to the federal level as needs arise. So the whole point is to get that local level nice and ready, resilient, so it doesn't have to make the call to the governor, to the president.
Okay. And in 2012, a lot of this work is being driven by this, so I grabbed a copy. You released a report. The National Academy of Sciences released Disaster Resilience, a National Imperative. How is resilience defined by this work?
So this body of work really takes resilience as a 5-verb definition: to prepare, to plan for, to respond, to recover, and to adapt. And there's other words around that. You know, a community should be able to do these 5 verbs in the face of adverse events, but those 5 verbs really give us something to do. And the report, and therefore even the President's policy directive number 8, which is about resilience, uses the same 5 verbs to really get across that we can do something to become more resilient.
And can you repeat those? I would love to put a slide up, and maybe we'll write a blog about this, but just say that one more time so people following along.
Prepare, plan for, respond, recover, and adapt.
Great.
So you have to you have to prepare for something to happen, plan for it. When it comes, be able to absorb it, respond to it. Then there's a long recovery, right? Here we are in Iowa. 2008 was a big flood, still recovering. There's a recovery period, and this adaptation period to be prepared for whatever comes next.
Because we know there's more adversity, whatever that looks like coming at us.
That's right.
Okay, and then this report also has some key recommendations. Can you share some of those with us?
Absolutely. So there's really 5 big ones that we'll talk about. One is to really get a handle on what your risk is. How do you understand your risk? How do you communicate it to yourself, to your office, to your constituents, so you can better manage it? So there's this risk set of recommendations. Second one is about measuring resilience. How do you know you're resilient? How do you know you're becoming more resilient? How do you document your progress? How do you say to your constituents, this was a good return on our investment? The third one is something that we all really work on, is no one can do anything alone, and we all are being asked to do more with less. So the third one is about partnerships and coalitions. The fourth one is about sharing what you know. Did you go through a flood? Did you learn something? Can you share that with other communities? Maybe you need more information and data. And the fifth one is all of those together to build towards a culture of resilience.
That's great, solid stuff. what has the impact been of this report? I know one impact is we're sitting here because we wouldn't be sitting here without this work. But in general, what has that impact of this disaster resilience report been?
Well, it even started before the report was actually done. 9 federal agencies, and sometimes federal agencies get along in a bumpy kind of way, joined forces for this report to be commissioned. And when it came out, the 5 recommendations really caught the imagination of a lot of policymakers, decision makers, academics, community organizations, and the response has been, since then, hey, can you help us implement what you said in this report? So the response has been extremely positive, and it really indicates a very strong appetite at the community, local, regional, state, and national levels.
And Linda, last time I mentioned you were on the show as a front leader in our recovery of the 2008 floods here in Iowa. What has your experience been with this work and how it's impacting?
I think that it really gives local communities in particular a basis of academic research. So when you have to explain to your constituents that preparing might be, for instance, in Cedar Rapids, that we build flood walls. But then there are secondary things. How is it that people are working together, understanding that we need to know things about vulnerable populations and we need to know things about businesses? So this report gives some heft, if you will, to local officials to say it's important that we convene, that we come together, that we have these conversations, and that we also share with people, everyday people on the street, think about this, because everyone has a part in the responsibility. So while this is a very big national report, the summary is very easy to read and fairly simple. And then this has allowed us to move into more specific takeaways for people to do preparation on their own.
And the summary is simple, and it's actually going to be your takeaway tool for this segment. Learn more about disaster resilience, a national imperative, by downloading the whole report or free summary. We have it available on our site, so we will put that information up for you here. Resilience starts at home, boosting the vitality and resilience of your family and community when we come back. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. We're speaking today with Dr. Lauren Augustine and Linda Langston from the Resilient American Roundtable. We've been talking about resiliency more at the national level, which you bring from DC. We're so happy you're here with us.
Thank you.
Let's shift a little to the local level in your area of expertise, Linda. What does it mean to build a resilient community?
Well, really, communities sometimes have some of the same problems that the federal government does, and we tend to live in silos and in our own areas. But really, to have a resilient community is to understand that we really operate in interdependencies. And so if we build those relationships and those networks prior to anything bad happening, then I know I can call on you and you can help me. Conversely, you could call me. So you need to help assure that you have those relationships in place. At the local level, no one does anything alone. The government cannot be the solver of all problems because we don't own all the infrastructure, for instance. So we have a company that provides electricity and provides natural gas. We have other parts of the business sector that may provide significant areas of transportation of goods. So we have to know how those things all work together. We also have to practice because you don't want something bad to happen and not be sure. It's sort of like, I liken it to the junk drawer in your home that we all have. And if you need something really, really quick, it's not the time to open up that junk drawer and be going through. But if you know, hey, I'm going to leave at this time and I need this piece of paper, well, what do you do with it? You put it right by your door or right by your purse. So your phone and your purse are all together. At least that's what I do, because if I don't, I could leave without it. But it's the same thing for a community, thinking about what could happen and then having conversations with everybody about, well, how might we work together? What do we know about what works well? What do we know that maybe doesn't work so well? And the other thing is really, you're always anticipating the unexpected, and the realm of resilience is really understanding that people need help after a crisis. And so if you don't anticipate some of that, it could be too long, and then you have the sort of secondary crisis that happens. So it's really all about a plan. You know, I've heard several people say that if you don't know someone before it happens and you need their help, I don't want to walk up to Lauren and say, Lauren, I need your help. I've never met you before, but I need you to do this. That would just, it doesn't work. And that's true in a community as well as it is anywhere else. So the opportunity is whether you as an individual think about that, or a government, or business, or the not-for-profit community, we all have to work together. So it's really about building community, but to the purpose of we want to be able to operate no matter what.
It comes down to relationships, planning, bringing it down even, let's go micro level to families. You and I were visiting and you told me about some interesting apps. It takes planning. You need to get this in place now, but
Right.
apps that individuals and families or friends can be using in times of crisis. Can you share?
Yeah, there's one that's called Help, I'm Okay. So it's just a simple app. If you were to look on any of the, you know, your app service, you can download it. And it pretty much, one of the things that happens, particularly in large-scale disasters, is that I live here, but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law live in Oklahoma. So if a tornado goes through Oklahoma and I want to know they're okay, but everybody is calling, everybody else is calling saying, I want to know, is my family okay? So you can actually just press that and it goes out to a network that you've already pre-programmed, and you can either say help, so people know, oh, I need help, or it can be I'm okay. So the app is called Help, I'm Okay, and there are others that people can find out there. I would also note that everybody should have a toolkit in their home. Everybody should be ready. So you need to know, where's your flashlight? Do you have batteries? Do you have some water on hand? All of those things that would allow you to survive on your own for up to 72 hours. No family should be without it. No family should be without a plan. Where do we meet if something goes wrong? Will it be home? What's our secondary place to meet? If, for instance, a flood happens and so I can't get to my home, are we going to go over to our grandmother's house? So everybody, again, you have to talk about that beforehand.
Great information and very relevant to the individuals and families that are watching today. So Lauren, shifting back to all that expertise that you bring from the national level, what are the key elements or variables that help a community understand its own resilience?
Well, it's interesting because you think the community level and the national level are very different. And in fact, there's a lot of similarities. And one element that's incredibly important is communication. You know, and Linda talked about communicating among families, but sometimes you have to get information out to the public or within your own community or within your own staff or constituents. So communication is really important. The other piece is understanding how your community comes together. You know, no one operates like this and like this. You know, if you have a car and you need to get somewhere, you need a road, you might go over a bridge, you might need to call someone. And there's, you know, so all these pieces of critical infrastructure, they link up, they overlap, and they intersect with each other. And so that's really critical to understand where the nodes are very strong, where they're redundant, where they might be more fragile. Because where they're fragile is where the impact can be very big during a disruption.
So based on your work in best practices, are there certain factors that are of the highest priority or that they interplay with each other to help a community build resilience?
I think, from my opinion, and from what a lot of the communities that we talk to say, it's really about the critical lifeline infrastructure: power, transportation, telecommunication, water, right? And so, because these link up over each other. You know, it's fine if you have power, But if you don't have water, maybe you can get water into your house, but you need to get water out of your house. And so these things really play over each other.
And I know when Linda was on the show last time, we actually shared a study that talked about after the hurricanes on the East Coast, but the importance of knowing your neighbor and being able to call. And it showed kind of the continuing mental health levels following that. So infrastructure core, and then of course I can't help but say mapping onto that the social emotional aspects. Does your
Absolutely. So you need to understand where the risks are, but you also need to understand where the resources are. Now the resources can be neighbor to neighbor, they can be individual to town, it could be town to state, or even up to the federal level. But it is. It's a big subject. It's complicated.
But that's what we try to do here on the show is break it down.
That's right.
So you're saying and pointing out these key elements, and it's a healthy and helpful conversation. Going back to the community level, while I have you sitting here, Linda Langston, who is responsible for implanting resilience in a community at a local level and sustaining the resilience building over time?
Well, I think that it really is a partnership. I believe that myself as an elected official, that we can be conveners. We can be the inviters in and say, let's all pull together and have a conversation. That's been one of the beauties of having Lauren in the National Academies here and being a pilot community. It really allows us to convene and have that conversation. So we can have it across a lot of sectors, but I also remind people that the sustainability of this is really on everyone. The accountability has to be each one of us, because there are disasters and crises that can happen that require us to operate on our own. And so we have to have a plan for ourselves. So as much as I, as a leader, can be somewhat responsible for that, if the individual is not responsible and accountable, then it really cannot sustain itself. So you really do have to look within your neighborhood, within your church, wherever it is you feel comfortable, to build those nodes and networks that help you know, I will be okay because I have a network that I can count on.
That's great information. So as each community works toward assessing risk and taking protective action, we reduce the economic burdens and social impacts caused by disaster. Find out what your community is doing. We've been talking about bringing together national resources and expertise with local needs and the know-how and the motivation. We're going to be talking about that dynamic when we come back. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. We are visiting with Dr. Lauren Augustine and Linda Langston about resiliency, the national level, the local level, the interplay between both. And it is such a timely topic as we are rolling off a couple days of you being here, your team being here from the National Academy of Science, and spending time in Lynn County. And so let's talk more about this collaboration and this interplay. What does this look like?
Well, from the national level in Washington, we work with a lot of the federal agencies and a lot of the national organizations. And the chorus we hear is we really need to be able to work at the local level. And there are barriers in some cases for the federal agencies or the national organizations to get to the local level. And so for our Resilient America Roundtable, we really provide this neutral forum to allow all of these multiple stakeholders to come in with resources and ideas and operational abilities to get the federal kind of scaffolding and structure down to the community level and the bottom up from the community level back up.
And resilience is a hot word these days. I know when we started our work 3.5 years ago, it's a community resiliency project. And I remember thinking and then saying to a few people aren't really talking about this, but I think in 5 years, everybody's going to be talking about this. And it didn't take 5 years.
No, it didn't.
A few years later, it is buzzing. So what organizations and agencies, in your experience, are interested in this topic and in contributing to resilience building?
Well, we know there are a number of businesses, very large businesses. We have an in a couple of arenas. I am working with Walmart. I know UPS Foundation is in with us. We have a lot of the very large planning companies like Dewberry, a lot of the big people who are responsible for the electric grid, a lot of folks who are very interested in IT and cybersecurity. But we also have different federal agencies.
Absolutely. So we have the private sector, and we have a lot of community organizations, United Way, American Red Cross, Points of Light, Boys and Girls Club, etc. And then you have the public sector, and this is where it really comes in. And we're so happy to be working with Lynn County and with Linda and the leadership at Cedar Rapids city level, because the public sector plays a big role, right? And whether it's about protection of lives, property, safety, or if it's about making sure resources are available, the public sector has a big role.
And I think that one of the things that's really huge, and you mentioned this before, Mollie, and that is the economics of it. We know that there are more physical disasters that are happening in our nation. We know that statistically, just looking at FEMA statistics since 1953, which anyone could find on the web. So that economic reality really begins to shift the responsibility where everyone understands this is an issue. So resilience has become a buzzword. It's become a buzzword because there are things that are happening that we have to do the response, the adapt, the mitigate, the plan. So all of those things have become ever more important for everyone.
And when Linda talks about the economics of these events, sometimes the events themselves are not spectacular, but they happen in places where there's a high population, or there's a elderly population, or a particularly vulnerable population. So you look at years like 2011, and there were 14 single incidents in this country alone that cost more than $1 billion each, right? So when you start to take these events that used to not be $1 billion, now they're $1 billion, there's a real impetus to say, wait a second, can we reduce the losses? Can we reduce the property losses, loss of life?
So there's certainly some shared interests in economic stability and the health and well-being and hope and engagement and those things that these agencies and organizations agree upon. They also are very different agencies and organizations. What's your experience in getting everyone to play nice? How do we get them to work together and play together?
Well, one of the things that we're really noticing in our neutral convening space is that everyone has something to offer. Everyone has something valuable to contribute. So you look at some of the science-oriented agencies, USGS, NOAA, and they have information. They have data. They have surveillance. They have information. And then you look at some of the other agencies that are operational, FEMA, DHS, Department of Justice, Department of Energy, and they need information. So you can cobble together a nice coalition of the willing.
And I think that's true at the local level as well. We all have different aspects and responsibilities within the community. But again, what drives us, and I think it's really true here in Cedar Rapids and Lynn County, is that we've been down this road before. So we know the challenges that are there. And so our goal is to not lose sight of that going forward. We don't know what the next disaster will look like, but we are really making the effort to work together.
A process of playing to our strengths and collaboration.
Absolutely.
I love it. So here is our wrap up on segment 3. Community resilience is a shared responsibility among citizens, the private sector, and government. It is everybody's business to work toward a safer, healthier, more secure, and more prosperous nation. I want to give one more takeaway. We've been talking about the pilot program. Resilient America is working in communities across the nation. Lynn County, Iowa, very proud to be the first pilot project. You can visit resilientamerica.nas.edu to learn more about our work in communities and how your community can participate. This is Dr. Mollie Marti with Resiliency Matters. Thank you for joining us on MediaCom NC22, your local programming leader.